Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, get to chat to some of the leading lights, most interesting figures that we've met in this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing. And today we have a very special guest. It's Felice Cohen, who is an author, a professional organizer, a motivational speaker. Sounds like exactly the kind of person I need in my life. And I think there are going to be an awful lot of people who think the same. Felice, how are you doing this morning? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we are very excited to talk to you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland. And welcome, Felice. Yeah, Roland, get in line. I think I'm also going to be getting Felice to come over to my house and organize my life. And we can find out what brings me joy. But in general, though, we were talking about how, you're a professional organizer, but you have applied this to organizing how you write and how you self-publish. We all know there's so many tasks that fall on a self-publisher, and we don't generally have, not all, some of us do, most people don't have a team of people to help us with it, right? We have to do it all ourselves. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to be like, oh my God, I have to market and I have to get a cover done. I have to do this, I have to do that. And I got to write the book, that should be our focus. So you're sort of in the business of getting organizing, getting motivated, all that stuff. So let's talk about that. First of all, actually, tell us how you got started doing all this.
Well, I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I thought, I want to move to New York City. How am I going to pay the bills? And I saw a woman on TV who organized apartments for a living. And I thought, I can do that in my sleep. I did it in the dorms in college. And that's what I did. I came to New York, and during the day, I organized people's lives and got rid of their clutter. And then, mornings and nights, I had to write.
And then how did you apply that sort of organization of things and stuff to writing and publishing?
Well, over the years, self-publishing became a thing. And I said, okay, I had a publisher for my first book about my grandfather, a Holocaust survivor. And then 9/11 happened and the world kind of spun out of control, and my grandfather got cancer, and I thought, I want to get this book done for him. I only wrote it as a gift for him, and I had to figure out how to publish it on my own, and Amazon was new with that, and it was so different. This was 10, 11 years ago than it is today. There's so many more tasks involved. At that point, it was just getting the book done and up, and then, of course, a video of me in a tiny apartment went viral, and it sold my grandfather's book around the world. And I thought that was easy, but that was a fluke. And it doesn't happen like that. There are literally hundreds of steps required to go about publishing a book if you're going to really do it the right way. And, I did a book on my tiny apartment and organizing. And again, it was about 6 years ago, and it was still not all the steps you need, but I just put a book out this past September. And this time I said, I'm going to really do it right. And I really researched during the pandemic, really all the steps required, but there were no checklists. And I think that's really key in being organized and following, any project you want to do is having a blueprint, having a plan. And that's what I wanted to work on, and putting together this to-do list, but putting it together the right way. I mean, and again, you look at your to-do list and it's still overwhelming. And to me, a messy garage is not overwhelming, but this list was. And I knew I had to get motivated to do all this stuff. And first I had to organize it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine, if you look at a messy garage, right, you're looking at everything at once as a whole. You can see everything you need to do, roughly how much time it would take to move things around and put them here and put them there. Whereas when you're facing this checklist of publishing tasks, it's like every task is so different. Every task requires a different skill set. It takes a different amount of time. Some of them take money. Some of them take, just knowledge of or research needed to know what you need to know or what you don't know, right? So yeah, I can see that would be a much more daunting. I know that that's a much more daunting thing than organizing your house.
Yeah, no, it was. So when I look at a messy garage or a whole house or whatever, I break it down. And I don't just look at the whole garage. I see lawn tools, I see sports equipment. And I, in that way, that's how I took my overwhelming to-do list and I broke it down into really the 3 parts that I felt were important for getting a book out. One is, the writing, and then there's the publishing part, and then there's promotion. So I kind of started with those 3 sections, and within those sections broke it down even more. So under the writing, there was the editing and all of those things. And then within each of those subsets, I looked at all the tasks and I put them in priority of what needed to get done first. So slowly, it was kind of like a huge jigsaw puzzle. And slowly, as I was putting this together, I was creating not just a better, tighter to-do list, but a real step-by-step list. Like I always say, if you put together a bookcase from IKEA without instructions, you're lost. But if you have that, first you do 1, then you go to 2, and that made it much easier for me. But again, that was still the first part, organizing it. Once I had that down, then I had to get motivated to do it. And that's, a whole other chore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because even your organizing of tasks is organized. You have it in subsections and priorities, and it's not just a list of here's everything you need to do, which is probably what most of us start with. Is we're like, okay, here's all the things I need to do, and then that's part of what makes it daunting, right? But you've separated it out and you prioritized it, and that helps to say, okay, let's just work on these things first because they're the ones that have to happen first. They're the ones that are highest priority. That alone, I think, takes some of the anxiety away from the overwhelmingness of just a big long list, right? So,
yeah. One of my favorite quotes is by Benjamin Franklin. He said, "For every minute spent in organizing, an hour is earned." And that's really how I look at all organizing, which the bottom line is you're saving time or you're creating time, because who wants to waste time, looking for your car keys? How many people are like, where are my keys? I want to spend that time doing the things that I love to do. And it's writing really is the first thing. And, the hardest part is the publishing and the promotion.
Right. And then, so the book, all these steps are in your book, I guess. All the, the checklists, the organization of it, the priorities. Is that right?
Well, so my last book, no, that's a memoir, but I do have lists. And I'm thinking of putting out a small book with all my steps on how to put together a book, on how to publish a book.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you had one that you were working on that had this, or that you would just release. So this is just in your head right now. Well, and you give talks about it, I know, and
it's in a notebook.
Well, okay, yeah, it's not out there for us yet.
But I do have, we'll talk about getting motivated to do tasks. But I do have, tips for getting motivated to do really anything on my website. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the motivation, because obviously, sometimes that's part of the problem. You have this big list, and then sometimes it actually unmotivates you. It's so long that I have this problem myself, is then you start procrastinating and looking for other things that definitely need to get done because I've got to clean this desk is a little bit messy here. I'll get back to the publishing in a minute, but I got to
anything except what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I got to hang that picture that's been sitting there for 3 years. So how do you get motivated to do what you really need to do?
Yeah, I love that you brought up procrastination. I feel like it's an author's Achilles heel, because you can sit down to do something and the next thing you know, you're 5 videos deep into YouTube and you're like, wait a second. I read that procrastination is the gap between intention and action. And it's in this gap where the self operates. And I think part of self-publishing, the biggest part of that is the word self, because it's almost like self-motivating. You've got to self-motivate yourself to do these tasks. And I was laughing this morning, I make my 3 cups of tea, and on one of the mug, it said, believe in yourself. And the other says, express yourself. And I think I think the self is this is the important part. But to get motivated, you really, again, the list helps, but there are some things to help you kind of get, I say, your ass in gear. And one is, like you said, clear away distractions. So when I sit down, before I sit down in the morning, I give myself 10 or 15 minutes to do the dishes, to put away the piles, to make the bed, to do these little things. Completing these little easy tasks are actually helping you towards the bigger tasks. I always say make your bed, because it's something easy to do and it makes you feel accomplished. I did something, and that's important in beginning these steps, because we have to get into the harder steps, things we don't always want to do. So definitely one, clear away distractions. That's definitely important. Two, it's hard to get in the seat, right? It's hard to finally start working, and you don't want the ding of your cell phone to kind of get you out of that mode. So I always say, shut off your notifications. Writing takes a lot of concentration and focusing, and same with the other tasks, the publishing and promotion, you're writing emails, you're pitching podcasts, whatever you're doing. It's so easy to get distracted. Our phones are horrible for this. So I always say shut off the notifications, because that's big. And then you want to set specific intentions or goals. Again, we have this huge to-do list. We've broken it down, but still there are a lot of things to do. And what I like to do is take 3 scraps of paper, and on each I write 3 things I want to try to get done that day, because again, 3 is a lot fewer than a big list. And I try to take one and do one at a time. And these things kind of give you direction. You can put them up on your fridge, on your bulletin board. And with each one that you complete, throw it away. In our line of work, we don't have a lot of accomplishments all the time. Sometimes it takes a lot of working on something before it can really be completed. How many times do you edit the back cover text on a book? Until you get it right. So there's a lot of this. And sometimes when you finish one little task, even it's something, I always say, post a picture or tell your friend, of the tasks you have to do. And it also gives you some accountability, which is another way to motivate yourself. But oftentimes posting on social media is one of our tasks, because this is something else we have to do. It's another hat we wear. So, maybe you get through all 3 tasks and you get 3 more done, or maybe you only make it through 1, but, it's still, these tasks are more doable than, the overwhelming complete list. So that's another one. One thing I always recommend is setting the timer on your phone. I say start with 45 minutes, because it's a good enough chunk of time, but it doesn't seem that long. And there's a lot you can get done in 45 minutes, and it goes very quickly. Some people might do 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. I think you have to practice and see what works for you. And when the timer goes off, sometimes you'll be surprised. You'll be in the middle of writing or a task and you don't want to stop. You can reset the timer. And other times you might be ready for a break and you get up and, check your texts or go to the bathroom or make some coffee, and it kind of moves your body around, and then you reset the timer and do it again. And I really think it's important to try to do this maybe at least 4 times a day, these 45 minutes, and you can do them more or less, but you'll really be surprised how much you can get done in this. And sometimes it takes a while to kind of get used to this, but we don't have bosses, right? We're self-publishers. There's no one standing over us saying, this needs to be on my desk by 5 p.m. You've got to get it done yourself. So again, these little motivating tips help you kind of towards that larger goal.
And that's the Pomodoro technique, right? I think a lot of authors use that, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Or you set your timers, you take your breaks. Yeah, I think when I was writing, I used to do that. that technique. There's websites that'll even do it for you, and sort of, yeah. I think there's ones that'll even like turn everything off, like so you can't even access anything until the timer goes off if you need that extra motivation.
Yeah, there are great apps that help people do something like this. There's one called 750 Words where it makes you write 750 words a day, or there's different productivity timers. Again, it's really trying to find what works for you. Like I always say, schedule a time to do it. People say, I don't have time to do it. And you really do. I mean, how much time do you spend scrolling through something? Or, so it's, if you really just kind of harness that time. And, I always say to people, if it says on your calendar 2:30, you have a dentist appointment, where are you at 2:30? You're at the dentist, right? You go, that's what, so put it in your calendar. Maybe at 10:30, you write from 10:30 to 12, or schedule something. And, I try to also give myself mini deadlines. There's all these little tricks to do just to kind of push you to try to do them. And whatever works. Some people, first thing in the morning, they get up at 6 a.m. and just get right in the seat before the phone starts ringing and the emails start coming in. It's hard. Look, we're everything, I'm distracted by a dish in the sink. So you have to just kind of find the things that work for you, and then stick with it. Some people, you can do one day of writing, that's your day of writing. And the next day you can just focus on promotion. And the next day publishing. And Fridays, I like to do like catch up on reading and clear out my inbox. And sometimes removing that pressure of having to write that day, kind of gets me motivated, for sure, to do that.
I find, like you mentioned the different techniques. I have my little Pomodoro timer, and that's as long as I'm disciplined enough to actually do it, it's one of the most effective ways I have of getting stuff done.
Yeah, it's true. We have to find these things. Even when you're exercising, how many times you say, okay, I'm done. And then you're like, all right, do 10 more push-ups or whatever. We have to kind of constantly, it's the self, right? It's ourselves. We have to push ourselves. And whether it's a little tomato timer or your phone, they're great. They're great for that because, you've got to congratulate yourself for doing this. It's not brain surgery, but it's not easy to push yourself. We're not in school anymore. We don't have deadlines. And so these mini deadlines are kind of, like that syllabus the professor gives you at the beginning of the semester. We've got a midterm, we've got this, and we have to kind of turn that on ourselves, and just do it. And sometimes we're going to fail, and sometimes we're going to really come through with it. And you have to, pat yourself on the back, or, I always say reward yourself. When the timer goes off, make yourself a latte, go for a walk, do jumping jacks, just something to kind of motivate yourself. Or, you have to find these things. It's like the carrot dangling in front. Dangle something in front of you and go for it. Because at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're publishing a book, and it's really an incredible thing to create something from like some idea in our head. And this is what we get to do. And it's important, to do that as well.
Wow. So jumping jacks is one of your motivations, man. You and I are very different.
Well, I feel like my tush sometimes melts into the seat here so long. So,
yeah, for sure.
But those are some of the different things that you need to like. I know that I feel better if I go to the gym every day, but I'm like, how am I going to spend an hour when I don't have an hour to? And it's almost like you have so many things you want to do, you end up doing none of them and just like feeling bad about it.
Horrible. Yeah, it does. It's that overwhelming. Where do I begin? And then you don't do anything. You feel worse.
So how do you prioritize tasks when it seems like all of them are high priority?
I try to first, I always have a to-do list, and sometimes I write them all on little pieces of paper, and I look through them and I see maybe I pick one thing that's easy to do. And that I know I can get it done. And that motivates me to a harder one. When there are three that are priority, you have to kind of figure out which is one priority. And maybe you do a little of one and then you stop and you do a little of another. And again, I'm writing pitches for different magazines. At least if I can just get something on the page, that makes me feel better, so that the next day when I sit down to work on it again, I'm not staring at a blank screen. It's really just pushing. And sometimes it's juggling as well. And priorities change during the day. All of a sudden you get a call from someone, everything gets put aside and you have to work on something else. Part of it's knowing and having that master list. I mean, I love going through that master list and checking things off, and reprinting it out and looking at it and seeing what holes are left. But it feels good getting closer to the end.
Do you find it seems like you're printing off your list and you're writing things on scraps of paper and all that stuff, so you find that sort of that physical interaction with your list is better than if we used an app that we can cross things off and just delete them or whatever? Is that a better technique?
I think it's, again, what works for you. For me, there's nothing I love better than crumpling up a piece of scrap paper and throwing it away. I feel like I'm also getting rid of clutter. And it's just how my brain works, I guess. But I have a friend who works at NBC and she has all this scrap paper. So I have all these used pieces of paper and I reuse them and I just write on the back when I take notes or when I complete a task. I just love crossing something off a list. It does make me feel better, but I also keep it on the master list on the computer. Yeah.
All right. So environmentalists don't have to worry that they can't do this technique. They can.
No, you don't use the back of a bag or write it on your hand. I don't care, but whatever, you find what works for you. I mean,
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Roland.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, do you have advice for people listening? I think everyone listening to this, probably the issue resonates. I mean, do you have any practical advice you can share with us right now?
For getting motivated?
Yes. Just how do we get words on a page? I was having a pretty good writing session this morning, but I mean, I struggle with it. It's like NaNoWriMo is something I don't do anymore, but I used to find it really useful because it's the discipline of writing every day, almost like the discipline of going to the gym. So it's like, how can you help us find that motivation?
Well, my last book began from first going back to my journals, and I it was just what I was feeling. You write down, and I think staring at a white page is hard and it's intimidating. And then I just kind of think whatever comes to my mind, I just write it. You maybe bullet it, stupid ideas, what you had for breakfast, what's going on in your mind, just getting something down there, rewriting, whatever you have to write. Sometimes I write the guidelines of whatever I'm pitching to and I'll put it there. And then I just kind of free associate words, thoughts, ideas. Just even if you close your eyes and just type whatever's coming to you, because at least there's something on the page. I think it's just getting something on the page. Oftentimes, if nothing, I will stop and I'll go for a walk. And that's when, or in the middle of the night, my brain will just come up with ideas. Definitely, I always say keep pad, paper, and pen next to it. But sometimes when I get out in nature, and I know I live in New York City, but Central Park is just my oasis. And you go in the park and you just look around and just try to think, don't listen to anything. Don't talk on the phone. Just at least give yourself a few minutes to just let your brain go. Yesterday, I biked up to George Washington Bridge and sat by the Little Red Lighthouse, and it was a gorgeous day. It was 75. And I just looked out at the water and just thought about the day and what I needed to work on that day, because I'd given myself a break. And it just kind of allows your mind to just expand. And even your eyes, living in a city, sometimes your eyes are blocked and sometimes it feels physical that your thoughts are blocked. So just kind of, exercising your mind and your vision can sometimes help.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of the organization part of it, if somebody was, ready to get organized and they're not, where do they start on that? And how do they start creating these lists and putting them together and prioritizing them and everything? Like, where would they go to, or how would they really, once they're motivated, they've gone through the motivation part of it, and now they're like, I'm ready to go, but I don't know where to start.
Right. This was a big project during the pandemic. I just started Googling, the steps to promote a book or produce a book or publish a book. And I must have taken from dozens of websites all these lists, but I found that the lists were general. People didn't want to share all the little steps, and there are a ton of little steps, saying publish the book, go to Amazon and publish the book. No, there are about 20 steps before you get to that point. So as I went through, I kind of had my three main parts, the writing, which included the editing, and then there's the getting the ISBN number, and then there's getting editors, and then there's design, and there's all these things. So I just started taking them, like I said, like a jigsaw puzzle, and putting them together. And then I actually, once I had all the parts, put them together, and I tried to figure out between the lines, how did you get from this part to this step? And I had to figure it out. Then as I started to work on it, I realized, oh, I need to do this before I can get to this part. And I wrote it down, and I started to kind of go through. And then I also actually, I got what I call a book coach, New Shelves Books. And they've been, Carrie there has been amazing in helping with my steps as well. But really having the steps, as you start to go, as you start to see, you'll find more of what you need to do.
Yeah, we had a book coach on back on episode, I was just looking up episode 25, and it was sort of the same thing. And she would help with the motivation part of it and the organization part of it as well. So I definitely there's definitely value in that for sure. It's interesting to hear that helped you.
Yeah, it helped in terms of sometimes you go to Ingram Sparks' website and it's overwhelming, and there are a bunch of things you need to do. So they helped with that because they have better knowledge of all these specific websites. And then I started to listen to webinars, and they would talk about mock-up shots. And I'd say, oh, mock-up shots. Well, how does that fit in my list? Well, you need to have the book design cover done first, right? And so that would go kind of after that. And then, even breaking down all the parts of the ebook or all the parts of the audiobook. You've got to rewrite the script a little before you can record the audiobook. Are you going to record it? Are you going to hire someone? And where do you get it recorded, and where do you promote it? ACX or Findaway Voices. And so each of these, as you know, has a million steps, and it's just making sure that I had all the steps. I didn't want to miss any of these steps. And I was constantly editing my to-do list as I was going.
Yeah, I think it depends too on your own personal publishing journey and what you're doing. Not everyone does a audiobook. Some people do their own covers, so they don't need the steps around hiring a cover designer or so it's obviously going to be a personal list for everybody. But okay, so basically, like, the best way almost is to sort of build it as you go, which helps you for the second book more than the first book.
Yeah.
But for the first book, maybe you need to do Google if you aren't sure, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it depends. You might be doing a graphic novel. You might be doing a nonfiction book. You might be doing a regular novel. So again, you tweak it, but as long as you have kind of the basics down, and even whether you do some of these things yourself or hire somebody else, you still need to stay on top of these things to make sure they get done.
Right.
Yeah,
you're the manager of all those tasks, right? You can't just say go do it and then not follow up. And then when it's time to get it done, if they didn't do it, then you're the one who's hurting, right?
Yeah.
So sure. If you, I mean, the more you talk about, the more I think you really should be writing this into a book, right? Because you could put all the steps, you can put all the things for all the different. There's a whole load of things, like you're saying, where you can have a section of nonfiction, and then that's a good starting point for people, right? Because they don't have to Google; they could just go and get your book.
Yeah, a workbook. I mean, it's like school. It's easy to fill things in when it's hard to do it, but as long as you have that blueprint, it helps.
Right. Yeah.
And how much do you think psychology comes into it? Because I know for me, it's like I have time in which I could write, and it's almost after a while you get a mental block, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse until you'd almost claw your own eyes out rather than sit down and do the thing that you profess to love most of all.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, as when I worked with organizing people, they were hoarders, and that's really a legitimate thing. And I think when I look down and I have a whole free day, it's almost like, uh-oh. But when I know I have like something at 10 and something at 2, then I'm kind of more apt to be more motivated to get it done with a shorter period of time. And I think that's where scheduling things on your own comes in. Like if you put down on your schedule book, Roland, if you say, okay, 9 a.m., I've got to write from 9 to 10. And then at 10 o'clock, I'm going to do 15 push-ups. And then at 10:15, I'm going to write from 10:15 to 11. And sometimes, and I know it feels like you're making it up, but if you see it written down in a book, you might be more apt to do it. Or if you say, I'm going to go for a walk at 11, then I have to get this done by this time. It's really playing with, your mind and playing tricks on yourself, but you've got to kind of push yourself until it becomes more of a habit. You know how good you feel when you've completed it. Right. So.
And that almost becomes the drug to make you keep doing it. Sorry, Craig, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, sometimes for me, it almost works the opposite, in the sense that if I have something recurring every day on a list, I do it at the beginning, and then I think I tend to sort of ignore it, like that thing again, like, and then I'm like, it's not that important, It's I guess it depends too. But I feel like if 15 push-ups were on my list, I would do that for a few days, but then eventually I'd be like, I got more important things to do today, and then I'd get more easily into the habit of not doing the 15 push-ups than I would into the. That's a personal thing.
Well, here's the beauty. You can change it up. You can do maybe one day you just, do 5 push-ups against the wall, or you do, high fives, or you just clap for 10 seconds. I mean, I think I know it's silly, but you're doing something. And sometimes when I'll write on a list, one of my 3 things is laundry. And when the laundry's done, I crumple it up and I feel like, okay, that was an accomplishment. We're constantly having to, tweak it, and push ourselves. Like, if you had a boss that said, I need this on my desk by 2 p.m., you'd get it on his desk or her desk by 2 p.m., or you're going to get fired. And if you get fired, you don't want to get fired. So you've got to find ways to do it. And I think you're constantly switching it around. That's why I like the rewards sometimes, because and the rewards can be a cup of ice cream if that works for you. But it's trying to push yourself, and it's tough. The self part of the self-publish is the hardest part. It's that self part, and you've got to find ways to push yourself. And I think it's also important that you make sure you take breaks. Like before the launch of my book, every day was, oh my God. And I had to kind of take a day and say, okay, it's Saturday. I'm going to go out and play or do something, because you're just spinning your wheels. And again, it's not until that book is done that you've completed something. So you have to look at those little tasks as things to be completed to feel good about.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point to say, you would do it if it was a boss that you were accountable for. And there's no reason other than mental to treat it any differently when you're the boss. you know, if anything, you should be more motivated to be accountable to yourself and things that are more important to you than to someone else, to your boss, right?
Yeah.
But I think in sometimes it doesn't work that way. Or like, you know, I'm not going to punish myself if I don't get it done, so it can slide today, you know. But it shouldn't be that. It should be sort of the opposite, where it's like, well, I'm doing this for me. It should be super important for me. You know.
But I think maybe we don't have enough empathy for ourselves to treat ourselves important as someone else.
Right. Could be.
Yeah.
Or we have too much where we're like, I am not going to punish myself because I know how hard my life is, so I can just let it slide. That's the way my empathy would work.
Well, look, that's also where the accountability comes in, right? If you post
Right.
a picture and say, these are my top 3 tasks today or something, or you just send it to your friend and then have them send you something they want to get done. And at the end of the day, maybe did you get it done, or make it a contest, or, you know, find a way.
Having an accountability partner sometimes helps. I know a lot of authors have that. They work with somebody who they're not necessarily writing the book with them, but they're sort of keeping each other in check, making sure that, you know, hey, did you write your 2,000 words today? And yeah, did you? Yeah, you know, like, and they just sort of help each other get motivated, and then it gives you sort of like a social interaction. I think part of the problem with being an author or a self-publisher is that you live a lot of time in isolation, right? And you sort of need that social sort of push to talk to people. And if you have an accountability partner, that sort of kills 2 birds with 1 stone, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's lonely. It gets hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that hurts the account. That hurts the motivation sometimes too. Is just being alone. Yeah.
And it's funny because it's one of the loneliest professions in some ways, except when you think about it, and no successful writer really does it on their own. It's like, I didn't manage to sell the number of books I did if it wasn't for my editor and the people who did reviews for me for my ARCs, and then the people who bought the books and the people who bought the next books. And you think, really, it's such a weird dichotomy, because we spend so much time isolated, and yet what we do inherently is about reaching as many people as we can.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think to go back a little bit, I think I like the idea of sort of almost mixing your tasks between writing, publishing tasks with some other tasks in your life that need to get done, because that also not only gives you a break from it, but it sort of gets the other things done too, right? So for the exercise portion of it, you know, you take a break to do some exercises, right? But it's a break from the mental work of publishing, or you take a break to go do your laundry, right? And it's still a break. It's not a break in the sense like you're not sitting down and watching TV. You have your, you know, I'm sure you have your time for that too, but it's a break from the monotony of the same thing over and over again. And then you're using that time to still be productive, but you're also taking a break, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Laundry can be one of those tasks you write down, or, you know, anything like that. And sometimes you need to use the other side of your brain. I always say, like, if all of a sudden I just like hit a wall, I will go reorganize my sweaters. Like, I'll dump them all on my bed, go through them. And it makes me feel like I'm accomplishing, you know, something, but, you know, it helps.
Yeah. And I do the same thing. I'll clean the kitchen and I'll, you know, put away the dishes. Your mind. It's not like you've turned off your mind. In some ways, you know, you're using that time doing a task like putting sweaters away or cleaning dishes. Your mind's still working, even if it's not overt. Not even if you're not like thinking to yourself, how am I going to solve this writing issue? Sometimes it's just working, and then it'll hit you out of the blue, and you'll be like, oh, you know.
Right.
I find a lot of one of the things that's been successful in my writing is I'll write 2,000 words, and then I'll just stop, and then while I'm doing the washing up, I'm listening to music and thinking of what I'm going to write tomorrow. And it's almost having the discipline to do it in chunks rather than like, oh, I've got to spend all day writing.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll take a break and I'll set my timer for 45 minutes and read a fun book. And I feel like, you know, if it's in the genre, sometimes, you know, that helps too, to kind of get you kind of thinking of other ideas. But just, your mind's still going, but at least you're doing something a little more relaxing.
Yeah, I come up with some of my best ideas in the shower, but then you don't have anywhere to write them down, and then it's like, okay, now I got to hurry this up so I can not forget it, or I'll write it on the mirror or the the glass. But yeah, I think, and there's another sort of technique I've heard, and I've sort of used it in the past to varying degrees of success, where you think about the problem before you go to sleep, and then when you wake up, sometimes that solution is sort of presented to you, right? And then sometimes it's crazy. So you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then you wake, and then in the morning you think about it and like, that's a terrible idea. Like, what was I thinking, right? So yeah.
So unfortunately, we are running towards the top of the hour. So before we go, though, can we have like 3 tips that you've got for people listening to this? What are their 3 action steps? They've listened to this podcast. What are the 3 things they can do now to make some progress?
Sure. I think, go through your whole list and find the top 3 things you want to get done today. And if one of them's laundry, if one of them's write 500 words, whatever they are, get them down. Just start somewhere, get started. And then make sure to reward yourself, pat yourself on the back. Remember, we're having, you want to have fun doing this. We're not digging ditches. We're not, working chained to a desk surrounded by 100 other workers. We are doing something that we wanted to do. We decided to do this. It's probably not what we majored in college. So it's something we've decided we want to do. So enjoy it. Enjoy doing that. And again, set a timer, or when you complete that task, really just call a friend and tell them you've started, and every day you're going to do 3 tasks, and maybe you make a pact with them for 5 days. Every day, let's share with each other 3 tasks for the day.
I love that. That sounds like it would work really well for me.
Good.
Craig's always telling me that I have 3 tasks for the day.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be your partner. Call me when you're done each task.
And so, Felice, where can people find your books and find out more about you?
You can go to my website, felicecohen.com, and everything is there on the website.
That's excellent. Oh, well, thank you so much. I found this really, really, this has been quite an exciting one, because I think this is a problem I've definitely experienced. I think so many other people will have experienced the same thing. So it's kind of nice to get the tips and also see some way out of it. And Craig, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
It's the same for me. Like I took some things, I took some notes of things that would help me and get organized. And I think, a lot of people are going to feel the same way. It's just, whether it's every single thing or it's just some of it, right? It's like writing. It's a journey. It's a personal journey. What works for one person doesn't work for another, but we all need to figure out a way to organize our lives and find our path forward in the most efficient way possible, so that we can get the most done, be as successful as we can. So this is the kind of thing we need, right?
Absolutely. Like a life set. It's like a lifer after being thrown out. So thank you so much, Felice. We are going to wrap things up now, but if you have appreciated what she has shared with us today, make sure you leave a comment down below. Let her know. Let us know if you have any more questions, if you want to have her come back for another time for more of this stuff. And if you haven't already, whether you're listening as a podcast or whether you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click that subscribe button. We really appreciate every single person who does. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. Until then, bye-bye.